Hi everybody, welcome back to Making Action Happen, the show that we do for Action 22 for our listeners in Colorado and for those around the world. We're doing something a little bit different today. I'm up here in Alaska on vacation and I can't, for whatever reason, stop working. And before we came up after this last legislative session, I've been giving a lot of thought to the people who make a living just producing our food, the food that we eat, and the people that do that. And this is not a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5 job. This is a lifestyle, the people that produce our food. So while we were up here, I started going to coffee with everybody, some of these old fishermen down here who've been doing it a long time. And I got to know our friend Don Nash here, who has been a figure, an icon, if you will, up here in Haines, Alaska. And so I asked him to come on and be on the show and just talk to us a little bit about what it is he does and just sort of, tell stories and do all that. So Don Nash, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. So first I want to tell everybody a little bit about you. So are you originally from Haines?
No, I'm actually originally from, I hate to say it, Seattle.
Oh.
My older brother and all my younger siblings were born in Juneau.
Okay.
But I was not, somehow.
Okay. Well, we won't hold that against you for the purposes of this show. Up there, it's sort of like saying, no, I'm not from here, but I have a lot of family there. We hear that a lot, but
yeah.
People always want to try to be Coloradans, but you're Alaskan. And how long have you been in Haines? You've been here for a long time.
Since 1986.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since '86. So besides fishing, you've also coached basketball. You've been a basketball ref.
I do. Depending on how poor the fishing year is, I do construction.
Oh, okay.
I built some houses and I do a lot of finish work. I have a little client base of little old ladies that can't fix their little things that bother them. And by the way, you said old fishermen when you started this.
I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about Ronnie Martin, who is older than dirt. Who else we always have coffee with every morning?
Well, Bruce.
Oh, Bruce, of course.
David Land. Bill Thomas.
Land. Yes, Bill Thomas was there.
Yeah.
So it's just every morning they go down about 6:30 as soon as that little coffee shop opens, the Rusty Compass. That's a favorite. It has stayed open while COVID was going on, and they've managed to stay. So, and I have to tell everybody, a lot of people who know me know this about me, but my husband TJ, of course, graduated high school here, but he grew up in a native village south of here called Angoon, and he went to Mount Edgecombe and then he came here for high school. And one of the things that people down south really don't understand, I didn't understand until I came up here, is basketball. Nobody's kidding about basketball or fishing up here. So basketball, fishing, and hunting, those are things we're not kidding about.
One of the things we inherited from the native culture was the idea of potlatches. And
right.
It's basically a get-together to celebrate harvests and different things. And basketball's kind of taken over that with our tournaments that we have in the winter. And it's always something that people look forward to.
Yeah, basketball is really a big deal. We were driving by and they have a basketball court that's covered, and regardless of what time of year, you're going to see kids on the basketball court here. And then, I mean, it's a really big deal. So let's talk a little bit about fishing. So we're on your boat right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see some of the pictures of his boat and the harbor in Haines and all those things. But you troll. So tell these guys have no idea what that means.
Okay, first
or
of
it means
all,
something very different down there.
It's spelled Troll, and it's confused a lot with trawl, which is Trawl. We fish just like you would in Colorado in a lake if you were trolling a spoon through the water from a boat, a moving boat, or if you're casting from the shore, you might have a spinner. We do exactly the same thing, but commercially we do it with power. We have hydraulic gerties that go up and down, and we snap, we call them spreads, and with attractants on them, hoochies, sometimes we use herring for bait, and we catch fish one at a time. We handle each one at a time. We hope there's more than one on a line when we pull it up. And we treat every fish as an individual fish, clean it, ice it, bring it to a buyer, and the fresher we can get it to them, the better it is for you or whoever else would buy it. And lately, bleeding the fish and the quality of the fish has become really important, and so we catch less fish some days because we're trying to take better care of the fish so that we get a higher price when we sell it. And
so you're getting ready to go out for salmon.
July 1st is a king salmon opening, and the season will remain open for the rest of the summer for cohos, which are silver salmon. For some reason, there's 2 names for every salmon in Alaska. There's 5 species, so there's 10 names you got to remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, coho's a silver, king salmon's a chinook.
Right.
Humpy is a pink, a dog salmon is a chum.
Sockeyes are red.
And sockeyes are red.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you'll do that. How long have you been doing with this setup, and how long have you been doing this?
I've been fishing since 79 with a commercial power troll permit. I started hand trolling, which is hand cranking, in 1973, and kind of supplemented my income working as a cold storage employee, basically.
Oh, okay.
I did that for like 5 years.
Because most everybody up here, they'll fish, and then they also have another gig, because fishing, of course, is very seasonal.
You know, we call the best fisherman the guy that's married to a state worker or a teacher.
Oh, yes, yes.
Then they have the chance to make pretty good money in the summer, but they also have the supplemental winter income.
So my husband comes up and fishes every year, and he fishes with Andrew Frisky. He commercial fishes with Andrew Frisky. And I remember kind of laughing at Andrew. He's got a really great setup, and I mean, he spends a lot of money, and his accountant, he said last year that his accountant told him that he's a principal or a school administrator of some sort, and he says that he does that to supplement his fishing, because he does this every year, and it's just such a part of the culture here. It's almost like you wouldn't do anything else.
Yeah, you know, Andrew's a young guy that has a lot of energy, and he does multiple things all at the same time. You know, he crabs, he fishes, he guides, takes clients out, and he's the dorm principal, so he works at a school that there's only 2 state-funded boarding schools in Alaska. One of them's in Sitka, and he works there. Right. And then the other one's in Galena. But
so in Alaska, state-run boarding schools, there's so many villages that don't have some of these native villages that are too small to have high schools.
Exactly, yeah.
So they have these state-run boarding schools up here, and they're actually really end up being really great schools for a lot of native kids to go to, and it doesn't have to be native.
And our son, when he was a sophomore, our son's song went there for a year because he was balking at our rules, and he found out that they have kind of the same kind of rules at the boarding school. It was actually kind of refreshing for us as parents. And he came back and went, oh heck, it's the same.
It's the same thing. You've got rules wherever you go. So I want to talk a little bit about Haynes last year. And so I first came up here with my husband. I wasn't married then, but with my husband in '93. And then we came back every summer, and this was, our oldest son was born in Juneau, and this is where we were going to be. But one thing led to another when we were back in Colorado, but you know, I've always had such a heart for Haines, and this last year, 2020, was particularly difficult for this community. There was COVID, which was hard on everybody, but there were so many more layers of things going on in Haines.
We had the perfect storm of events, really. But the hardest thing for a lot of us, with especially the COVID issue, was just coping with the mandates that didn't apply to a small isolated community. So many communities in Alaska had no COVID issues because of their built-in isolation.
Right.
And yet, you know, with travel restrictions, and the biggest blow for us is our closest neighbor city-wise to drive to is Haines Junction and Whitehorse, and we can't go through the Canadian border and haven't been allowed for over a year now. And that really has caused a lot of you know, just you when you lose a freedom that you've had, it's tough to deal with.
Well, you know. and tourism's a big moneymaker for Haines. It always has been, or it has been for a really long time.
The Alaska Highway brings a lot of tourists to Haines, and one of our main ferries, small boat ferries, he said 90% of his clients come off the highway, and with the border closed, he's not doing anything. But
so it was that last year and this year, because the border's still not open.
Exactly.
So all the RV parks and all of that, so that revenue,
right.
They're not getting that revenue. And then in December there was we'll call it a rain event, and then it caused something like
we had 6 inches of wet slushy snow, the kind that holds water, and
right.
Then we had tropical. We are in the northern end of the rainforest, the Pacific Coast rainforest, and so rain is not an unusual event, but the amount of rain we had in about a 48-hour period was like almost unprecedented. And did you get that otter?
There's an otter right there.
Yeah.
2 sea otters right there. They've been in the background the whole time.
Anyway.
Did you get him?
I think so.
You know, I was leaning over the rail over here painting the stern around the letters yesterday, and he came up like a foot from my face and went, ah! And then when he turned, he splashed my fresh paint with salt water.
Darn it.
But anyway, back to the slide, so it held all this water, and it was a tremendous amount of weight. And this is not unique. It happens a lot in southeast Alaska with the steep mountainsides coming down. And there's no soil structure under the trees and everything. There's a foot or 2 feet of whatever, and then the trees grow right on top of it. And unless a root goes in, it doesn't hold it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this whole hillside came loose and took a couple houses into the bay with it, and we lost a couple of young people that were in their 20s, and one was a Haines girl who had just gotten a teaching job here at her hometown, and
kindergarten
and
teacher.
The other one was a young man that came to Haines a couple years ago and fell in love with it and said, I'm going to live there, and he was 27, I think.
And he was going to be doing economic development for
Haines. He was actually been working for about 6 months as the economic development. I don't know what his word was, but something like helper. I know he helped me with some of the Alaska Cares COVID type applications that fishermen could apply for, people that had been impacted by the mandates.
Yeah. So there's planes going over too, but that's the noises, the otters and the boats going by and the planes going. And I didn't want to do this like in a studio setting. I wanted all those sounds behind us because it's hard to really express how it is up here. So will you talk just a little bit, because you know I was messaging back and forth with a friend of mine from the Colorado Farm Bureau down there, Sean Martini, and they're having their conference today or yesterday, and the comment was rural issues are rural issues are rural issues wherever they're at. How did the CARES money help you guys out, or did it, or what did you guys do?
Well, a large part of the money came to Alaska and was given to different agencies in the government to figure out ways to disperse it. And the biggest one that impacted me was the Alaska CARES Act, and it was, as a lot of things are with governments, a little bit hard to figure out.
Yeah.
So I got my daughter, who has grown up with a computer and understands how to fill out every line and know which button to click. She spent about a week putting together kind of a portfolio of information that they required, and it resulted in almost a summer season's worth of income for us. Now, I will say that we weren't impacted by COVID as fishermen because it's deemed essential, just like farmers. And we are so much like farmers. The only difference is we get a little different view every day because we don't have to plow the same land. But we go out and try to, the ocean is our incubator, and we just try to harvest the fish that the ocean puts there. And different agencies put fish back in, and we pay for a lot of that. 3% of my income goes directly to aquaculture, to enhancement projects, and we catch a pretty large percentage of hatchery introduced fish that come back to us. But they go away when they're fingerling about this long, and they go out in the ocean, and it's kind of luck of the draw whether they get eaten or they come back so we can eat them. Because it's big fish eat little fish down in the water. And but when my daughter applied for that for us, we just, and then there's deadlines, and we got it in the day the deadline closed off.
Right.
Some of my fishing friends were out fishing and they didn't hear about it, and so there's a little bit of a lot of people, we make our living in June, July, and August, and a little bit in September, and a lot of these things came out when people were fishing. So they didn't have any idea, and there was no one really so David, this young man, had helped I think he told me about 40 different gill netters here in Haines apply. Because I'm a trawler, I go 100 miles away and fish out in the ocean, but the gill netters come and go from Haines every opening, every week. And they're fishing also, and a lot of them are like me, they're not computer literate, but this young guy had just come out of college, he had several degrees, and he could sit there and in 2 or 3 minutes do what might take me a week to do. And he told me that he had helped the local fishermen to the point of almost $1 million of grant applications and different CARES Act things. And
so the helper, you lost the helper. There was a lot of homes that were affected, and even if they didn't get hit by the slide, they're cut up. There's a lot of homes that are cut off out there.
There were several homes in other places that were pushed off their foundation from smaller slides, or mainly a lot of the major damage done besides the big slide were creeks and drainages that washed out. And they're pushing boulders and rocks down, and the attrition of that constant battering. Some people were lucky and got sandbags and were able to divert it a little bit, but it all happened pretty fast. And it was so unusual. In all the years I've lived here, I've never seen it that bad. We always have roads wash out, but that's normal.
But and you're prepared for that, to have the roads washed out. But this was so the other thing that is sad and frustrating is that a lot of these folks, the insurance declared this an act of God. And so they're just out, and there's just nothing. So on the tail end of all of this, these guys people are losing their homes. There's all these displaced families there, and there's no way for them to.
Well, the community kind of pulled together a lot. The communities in Southeast were very supportive. Even about a month after the disaster, we got a van off the ferry from, I think it was from Wrangell or Petersburg, and they had parked it on the road with a big sign, and people would bring things to put in it, and they sent it up here, with love from Petersburg or Wrangell, or maybe it was both of them. And then some folks in Juneau put a 40-foot rental van in the parking lot of Fred Meyer, and asked for Christmas decoration donations, and my wife was involved with a group of people that put together about 40, I think it was about 40 complete packages of Christmas decorations, including a small Christmas tree and everything you would need, because we had both hotels were almost full because there were people that were in slide zones that were advised to vacate.
Right.
And so there was those kind of people. There was people that were cut off when the slide happened. There's about, I don't know, a dozen homes on the other side of it.
And the fishermen were the ones that ran out and picked them up and got them back in.
Yeah, there was a lot of boats out searching through the debris because, you know, for about 4 days they were just spent a lot of time looking for David and Janae, and who were never found. And anyway, you know, I think fishing communities are a lot like the smaller rural farm areas where, if, you know, there's something that happens,
everybody's
people draw together.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Our mayor, you know, did a great job, but he was just voted in, and
right, like
somebody
a few
told
weeks.
and somebody had told him, well, you know, it's an easy job, you just have to run meetings. And then this happened.
You know, we were watching and calling and everything, and he's relatively, I think he's our age. I think he's about our age, so I'll say he's relatively to do that. Somebody's heading down. But it sounds like everything, by all reports, he just did an excellent job through all of it.
Yeah, he had a real tough. It turned into kind of a PR job more than anything, and you know, sometimes you get so much help offers and stuff, but how do you put it to use and the best use?
And in a time of COVID, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, there are agencies that were sending up help, and then they were trying to socially distance while you're looking for people, and just, I
had friends in Sitka that called me and said, we want to send money, but we don't want to send it to a large organization.
Right.
So I put them in contact with the Ministerial Association, and it kind of backfired on me because that money ended up in our church treasury, and our pastor said, we need to get this money out of here and get it to people that need it.
Yeah.
And somehow I ended up as the head of that committee. So my wife and I are calling, and we're trying to do detective work to find out who needs the money
and what. Yeah.
I never realized how hard it was to give away money. And with no strings attached. They didn't have to see some if you go to some of the bigger organizations, you have to bring in, they want paperwork. And there's some people here that just didn't want to be hassling with paperwork. We finally got rid of it, and it wasn't a large amount of money. It was like $27,000 or something.
Right.
But we had people say, no, I don't want it. There might be people that need it more. And that was the biggest sentiment. And we had to talk to some people. Finally, I got frustrated, and we got a list of about 8 people that we knew were impacted, and we went and put it on their electric bill. And so they didn't have any choice about it. They got it that way.
Oh, that's super creative. Like just
and
pay for their electricity or do something.
But these were the people in Sitka that sent it were just fishermen, or one of them was a Coast Guard, retired Coast Guard guy that does our boat exams. You know, we have to get an safety exam every 2 years, and we get a sticker. You have to have the proper life-saving gear and things like that. And I had met him up through the years with our inspections. But
so let's talk about that, about the regulations. You know, the the ag industry and the food producing industry, it's so heavily regulated. What does that look like for a fisherman?
Well, it's about I would say it's about $2,000 a year in direct licensing.
Okay.
You know, professional fees, direct licensing. To redo my sticker every 2 years, the Coast Guard likes timed things, and they don't like a piece of equipment on your boat that hasn't been inspected or has new batteries or whatever. Some of these batteries for EPIRBs and things are pretty expensive. So like for instance, my 4-man raft, it costs about $4,000 or $5,000 to buy it, but every year I have to send it to Seattle to get repacked. So they pop it open, they check all the time stuff, and it costs me an average of about $1,200 a year just to do that. So I think that dollar for dollar trolling is still one of the cheaper types of fishery to get into. But the regulations, as far as the licenses and the safety regulations, are the same for almost all the fisheries, for gill netters, for seiners, for longliners.
Right.
And I'm lucky because I can longline. Also, I have some poundage that I can longline, and besides trolling, so that really supplements our income.
So as far as actually catching fish, are there any rules about catching fish? Do you get to just catch whatever you want, whenever you want?
I usually catch mine right here. Yeah, that's a standard joke and a comeback when, because fishermen like to be secretive. But with the cell phones and communication, it's hard to keep a secret anymore for more than about a day.
Right.
If the fish are really biting someplace.
Oh, yeah.
But the standard answer is, where'd you catch those fish? It's like right here.
Right there. Yeah.
But see, and the other joke that I like is gill netters catch their fish by being gilled. The fish swim into it and they get stuck around their gills. And my fish have to choose to die.
Oh.
They have to bite that bait. And some fishermen are just better at causing those fish to bite that bait.
Right.
And you always think there's some mystique about it, or some people are lucky. The only way I've ever been able to be successful is to keep my gear in the water. I call it from can see to can't see. They don't bite very well in the dark, or we'd probably fish 24 hours a day. But we, starting July 1st, I'll have the gear in by 4 a.m. and probably won't pull it till 10 at night.
So why July 1st?
Our openings kept getting moved back with fish conservation issues, and the biggest impact over the years for us has been the Columbia River dams.
Okay.
And that system was producing a huge percentage of the fish that Alaskans caught, because they go out in the Gulf and they kind of mill around, and the Gulf just is like an incubator for all the, even Californian rivers. Those fish would come up. And now with the tagging programs, the biologists know exactly where a lot of these fish are coming from. But some of the upriver Columbian runs were killed. They're gone. They won't come back. And those were those larger fish.
Oh, gotcha.
And when I started fishing, I was in the early 70s, was on the tail end of some of those big fish still being around. But our average for king salmon has gone down from 18 to 20 pounds of fish. This is cleaned and gilled, to about 10 to 11 pounds now.
Wow.
And it's the difference between all the big natural runs versus a lot of the enhanced hatchery fish.
Yeah.
And there's so many other conditions, it's hard to blame or point your finger at any one thing.
It's layered. It's this
very
on
layered.
this on this.
I mean,
on
you
this.
could put 2 million fingerlings in the water, and if they get on good feed and there aren't a lot of predators around, you might get 1 million of them back. But it could be the first couple of years the fishing game had to learn things also. They grew all these eggs up to fingerling size, and they released them, and a humpback whale happened to be right there, and he ate them all. A humpback whale can eat a lot of fish, and those little fish were in a nice little school, and and then guess where he was the next year, right about that time. The whales are smart.
The whales are smart, yeah.
I put the intelligence of a whale at a good bird dog's intelligence. I think they're very similar in intelligence, and they learn very fast. We deal with sperm whales when we're fishing black cod out in the deeper water, and sperm whales are very intelligent, and they know that when they hear the hydraulics turn on a boat, and they can hear that. I mean, they live with their sonar. They come to the boat.
Yeah.
And,
do you get fish stolen off your line?
Oh,
ever?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's common. I don't count the fish as mine until I get it on the deck, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that'll take it. There's sharks. We have in the waters off the Alaskan coast, a lot of people don't realize it, but great white sharks are cold water fish. And we have great whites. On our last halibut trip, I had about a 90-pound halibut with its tail about a foot up from where the meat starts, was completely bit off, and there was those distinctive V-shaped
Shark
teeth marks on there. And fishermen have caught great whites in their gear, so they know they're out there. But we have a poor beagle, which we call a salmon shark. It follows the schools of cohos around, and then we have a blue shark that's not very big and has smaller teeth, but still does, you know. So yes, we have. It's nothing different than having pests in the farming area, why they use pesticides. You know, we just have to.
It's just part of the game.
Yeah, we just put up with it.
It's just part of the game. You just keep the line wet.
Yeah, and the best thing about a shark bit king salmon is you can barbecue the rest of it.
Can confirm.
Yeah.
So what's the future of fishery? What does it look like in 5 years?
When I started fishing in the 70s, it was the same gloom and doom as I hear now.
Yeah.
And that was how many, 40 years ago?
Right.
And I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist, and I feel like that these kids that go off to college and decide they want to become biologists, they study, like Alaska was lucky because they studied all the things that the departments had done wrong, and Alaska was on the leading edge of hatcheries and enhancement and things like that. And so I guess I'm one that kind of trusts that the ocean is so productive and rebounds so fast.
Right.
And a good example is whales. When I started fishing, you know, you see humpbacks once in a while, but we never saw the whales that get our black cod when we're fishing out there, the sperm whales. And now there are groups of sperm whales up and down the coast. In fact, they have tagged them, and you can actually go, I don't know if it's on Google or what, but you can Google sperm whales and you can actually follow them on your computer.
Where they're at.
There's a site so fishermen can see where the concentrations are. But I've seen schools of fin whales, which are a really large whale, close to the size of the blue whales. I've seen 40 or 50 of them spread over a 10-mile area.
Right.
We have the gray whales coming through. I mean, there are a lot of whales. The population of humpbacks have gotten so large that the young bulls don't go to Hawaii anymore in the wintertime. They always used to go there. Yeah. But because the bigger, you know, they call the males, the bigger males, it's all about breeding, and they don't want to get beat up. So they've been staying. We've had humpbacks right here in Southeast in the wintertime in January. It's not uncommon to see a whale. That never happened 20 years ago. Wow. And so the ocean can replenish itself if we allow it to. And trolling is kind of a skim the cream kind of fishery. Our impact is only as much as they allow us to fish. You know? And gill netters fish terminal areas, which means they're closer to where the salmon are spawning, so it's easier for the biologists to control escapement. Escapement is what they call it when the salmon get into the rivers and are not actually allowed to spawn. Okay. And, you know, silver fishing in the rivers here is a big thing, but honestly, I have never been able to, in good conscience, catch a coho in a river and take it home and eat it, because it got through all my peers' fleet. It got through all the gill nets, and by the time it gets to the river, I figure it should have it should have a free pass. Yeah, you know? I love that. Anyway, I'm like, again, I'll say it, I'm optimistic, and trolling, we have bad days and we have good days, and but it's a lifestyle thing.
It is.
When you referred to the old fisherman earlier, I thought, most of us feel like we're 18. We're just in an old person's body.
No.
And because we love what we're doing.
Absolutely. And you come back and do it
Yeah.
again and again. And, my husband TJ, like, he can't be up here and not start looking at boats and not start doing that. And I'm thinking, he's talking about, okay, when I retire in a couple years, I can do this. And I'm like, when you retire in a couple of years, but it's so in who all you guys are. It's so, as I sit there and listen to your stories and listen to you guys interact with each other, it's breathing for you almost. It's
Exactly.
so,
Well, I'm sure that TJ has a lot of memories of the fleet in Angoon, which is one of the smaller fleets, but there's people there that were good fishermen.
Yeah.
I knew some of the trawlers from Angoon, but it's something that is kind of bleeds out through everything around here, and from the blessing of the fleet in the spring to the fisherman's appreciation ball that usually takes place, and I know that a personal story about TJ is that my son Lee and him are the same age. TJ's a year older, but they were on a track team together, and they were doing the 4x400, I think.
4x2.
4x2. Anyway, there was a fisherman's ball in the spring, and I think Lee was a senior or junior. You were a senior.
Yep.
And they went, and of course, fishermen, they always have beer at these things, and nobody was policing any of the kids or nothing, and come to find out, they had some kind of contract thing that the kids had to sign, and so Lee, being who he was, and my son, I was proud of him, he confessed that he'd had a beer at the fisherman's ball. So they didn't allow him to go to state. The kids had qualified for state, which is a big deal. You have to play against all the there's about 7 or 8 schools in Southeast that you had to compete against to get this bid to state. So Lee wasn't allowed to go, and I don't know who ran his place. I don't even remember how they did, but I know Lee still talks about it, and he's 47.
We definitely missed having Lee lead off our relay there.
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Anyway,
that's a lot to do.
that's life in Southeast with fishermen. Sometimes kids grow up fast, and most of the kids have something to do with a fishing boat at one point in time in their life. Like, I had a couple high school kids down here just a couple days ago helping me do the grid work, and one of them showed up in tennis shoes, and I said, doesn't your dad own a boat? We're going to be on the grid. It's like water, mud.
Yeah.
So he had to borrow a pair of my boots, and they refused to put rain gear on, and they got black paint all over themselves everywhere. And just typical teenagers, but they have learned that they can do something on a boat. One of them helped me unload our last load of halibut, and so the kids around here have opportunities. Just as in, I had a friend, when he came up here fishing, he said, this is a lot easier than running irrigation pipe.
Oh yeah, or running a fence or whatever down there. No, it's
He was from Idaho and worked for a farmer one summer in the 100-degree heat. Anyway,
he'd rather be up here fishing.
Well, every fish we catch, we have to, there's tug, and they're trying to get away, and we're trying to catch them, and there's one hook in their mouth, and we stun them. We don't use nets. We try to hit them on the top of the head and get them in the boat so that there's no scale loss, because it's a food item that as soon as it hits the deck becomes food, and so we have to treat it. We want it to look as nice and not be bruised and everything. So
there's a whole bunch that goes into it.
Oh yeah, there's little, like you said, little layers. You just keep adding to it.
So I'd like to finish this off with asking this one question. So if there was anything that you wish that maybe the people on the receiving end of the fish, the final consumer of the fish that you catch, that you wish they understood that you think maybe they don't, what would it be?
That wasn't on the list of questions. No, I'm kidding. She didn't give me a list of questions. Well, we have some young people in the last 10 years that have started small startup cold storage operations,
right.
and it's all about quality, not quantity, and it's kind of the high-end thing. Like if you see, you get online and you find somebody, you can buy vacuum packed, pressure bled salmon that's like $20 a pound. Well, it's probably the best fish that you can buy and thaw out and cook. It's ready to cook. There's nothing you have to do to it except find a recipe you like and cook it. But the main, I don't know, that's not really something I thought about. The main difference is know the difference between a trawler and a trawler, because a trawler is usually a corporation or a large entity, and the trawlers in the Bering Sea's bycatch of king salmon is larger than the total allowable catch of all the commercial fleet in Alaska. And that's just from however many trawlers are out in the Bering Sea.
Right.
And so the main difference is know the difference between the two words.
Between the two words, okay.
A trawler is usually a family. It's usually, a lot of times it's a husband and wife, fathers and sons. My nephew, who's 19 in college, is going to join me tomorrow, and he's been fishing with me for 4 years now. Before that, I had my niece for 4 years, and it's actually a good living for the kids. They can make a lot more money than they can make minimum wage.
Right.
And I love it when they make a lot more money, because that means we do shares. They don't work for a certain amount. They get a share of the catch, and whether it's 10% or 15% or 20% or whatever you think they're worth, but they have to help produce those fish. That doesn't just happen. And so I guess what I wish people knew that maybe they don't know is the understanding of the terms and the differences. There's a lot of fish that are put on the market that are not wild-caught salmon.
Right.
And there's a lot of unscrupulous merchandising going on, and not a lot of government oversight on the quality of fish. You're kind of stuck. So
the government oversight is of you, but not of
of the whole
marketing.
Food marketing program. Like beef has a FD, what do they call that? Approval. They get little stamps on it. Yeah. There's nothing like that with fish yet. But it's better when we have these young guys that have started these. I know of 3 operations in Sitka, Pelican, and here that have started in the last 10 years by kids. I'm going to call them kids, around 30 years old, and they're using the internet. And so if you just take a little bit of time on the computer and do some Googling, you can understand pretty fast the differences in qualities of fish that are out there. Sitka Salmon Shares is one operation. Yukobi Fishery in Pelican, Alaska is another one. And again, they're families. The people in Pelican are a young family that the wife worked on a buying scow for quite a few years. That's how she met her now husband, Fisherman. Yes. Who decided it would be better on the family if they started this business, and they do an online order system, and then there's Haynes Packing, Harry Reeds. Oh yeah. And he does a wonderful job. In fact, he cuts fish and vacuum packs them for Sitka Salmon Shares, and they're big. They've just bloomed. You'll see them advertised on national TV, and we love that. And there's a lot of parallels between the fishing industry here and cattle producers there in Colorado. And so what I'm hearing from you right now is what we love to hear is that these producers are going to figure out how to improve all the time without that government oversight, without that. They're just doing it on their own because it's the right thing, and they do a better job. They want to create a better product.
they want to take care of the environment when they do it.
So I only know these people personally, but Seth's operation, he ships fish to Texas, and they go to shows, and they'll actually have a booth where they're actually cooking it for people.
Oh yeah.
And my daughter sent me a link to a picture from their website, and it was a young woman in Texas, and she's holding up a vacuum packed coho. It's about a 7 or 8 pounder, and it's the whole fish is vacuum packed. There's no head on it, and there's a white sticker right on the middle of it. And she said, "Dad, zoom in on that sticker." And so I zoomed in on the sticker, and this is in Texas. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know Seth was doing this, but he puts the label every time they mark off their line of fish that they're processing from a different boat. They start putting different labels on the packaging. And so that white label said this fish was caught by our friend Don Nash on the Shinnecoop.
What?
So the oversight over me as an individual fisherman to produce the highest quality fish you can get is really high.
You're letting the market drive.
And she had this huge big smile on her face,
so
and she knew exactly if she wanted to call me and say, "Hey, this fish has a bruise on it," or whatever, she could really do that.
She could really do that.
Yeah, well, I'm not hiding, So
and so your name is on it. You're gonna do a good job.
And
with
so
it. Yeah.
So the just a little bit of schooling yourself on what's available could go a long ways.
Could go a long way. And then there is that sort of direct to table kind of idea that's coming from there that we love so much.
They're actually taking out about 2 parts of the middle part of the equation. So they don't go to a cold storage, they don't go to a broker, and it's not a large lot. Some of the large cold storages that freeze several million pounds a year might want to sell a 20,000 pound lot of fish.
Oh yeah.
Whereas these small marketers are trying to ship out 20 pounds at a time, or 5 pounds at a time, or whatever a person can afford.
And they sell it out. It's not like it's sitting that gets sold out.
They're in fact, the reason Sitka Salmon Shares has gotten a hold of Harry is because they can't get enough to supply the demand they have, so they're getting other people to do it. And also on our end of the thing, I'm not saying that old fishermen can't learn things, but we've got a much younger skipper fleet now.
Oh yeah.
And they're smarter because they've had to learn with smaller seasons and smaller pound totals is how do we make the most money out of it. Well, the first answer is quality.
Yeah.
And so they've learned how to bleed fish, and we've had to learn how to. I didn't pressure bleed fish until about 6 years ago.
Right.
It's kind of what freezer boats have always done it.
Right.
But ice boats, the difference is there are some boats like the one that TJ works on, where they head and gill their fish and bleed them, and make them look just beautiful, and then they stick them on trays down in the hold, which is like, I think Andrew's boat has like 40 degree below zero. Those
and
fish
TJ crawls in there. I got pictures. It's crazy.
Yeah, he looks like the space monkey down there.
Yeah.
All dressed up.
We prefer the term fish ninja. But
fish ninja. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you have to start dressing in black then, because I think there's a lot of other colors involved.
He just ordered the hood yesterday, so yeah.
Got my black Grandins on ready to roll.
Yeah.
Well, and we love to hear that. These younger guys. It's almost like you're doing a handoff, and they're developing in that, and I think that's something that is a little bit lacking in some of the ag producers down there. Is how do we the sustainability as far as having younger people getting into the industry and doing that, but up here that's happening sort of organically and naturally. Don's getting ready to head out. He's going to be gone for up in the fishing grounds for all of July and into August, and then he'll be back. So we're going to say goodbye to him. Hey, Chad Worthman, I know you're listening, because I know you want to be up here in Alaska. So maybe next year I'll let you come up, but we'll see. Join us next week, where I ask a lot of more overly complicated questions, and Brian McCain explains to his wife that instead of buying land down in Trinidad, he's going to be buying property up here in Alaska, and we're going to move the whole operation up here. We'll talk to you about it next week. Thanks. We'll see you then.
Goodbye.